All right, welcome back into the podcast. First time I've had this guy on my podcast, and I'm excited to do it because when I was just a wee lad coming out of Syracuse University and running the board on the weekend for Sporting News Radio, this guy was cutting his teeth as a host at that same network. He is Matt Spiegel, of course, afternoons on The Score with Danny Parkins, and he joins me now. Matt, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Bill, it's so good to see you, man. I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, so I was doing 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings on Sporting News Radio and occasionally Saturday mornings. And that was so fun to be doing a national show since I was still a Score guy at the time and a Chicago guy. But so I was on 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. for East Coast time. So I do a topic two ways. One for the churchgoers on a Sunday morning. And then I'd spin it midway through and do it for the late night partiers in LA where I was on 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. You know what I mean? So it was a really fun way to learn how to be a national host.
Yeah, no, and look, it was a fun place to work, and there were other, Chicagoans, Mike Mulligan, of course, was a guy that would work there from time to time. And, for me, I used to do an NFL show, covering the NFL all afternoon, and was there for the Dick Duran 13-3 team. And,
wow.
And I just and Randy Merkin, of course, longtime guy at ESPN, just sitting there in the control room going crazy for all those Mike Brown interceptions. It was a fun place to work, but we move on and talk some Chicago Bears with you, and got a little surprise here just before this podcast. Of course, we're recording here on Tuesday afternoon. Mm-hmm. Montez Sweat heading to the Chicago Bears from Washington for a second-round pick. So I'll just tee you up, Matt, and kind of what is your initial reaction to hearing the Bears acquiring Sweat?
Ryan Poles is weird, man. I think he's really weird when it comes to the trade deadline. And I admittedly am burned by the Chase Claypool deal, which is the worst thing he's ever done. Now that Claypool's gone, we don't lose that trade again and again by watching Claypool and getting frustrated. But that was a deal, and it was a high too, and they outbid Green Bay supposedly to get Claypool, and it was a disaster with some horrendous pro scouting for a character you wanted nothing to do with.
Right.
So this is another high too. That's a very valuable pick. It's number 35 as it stands right here for a guy who's going to be on the free agent market, who they could have just given money to. Now, maybe this goes along with an extension, and whoever traded for Montez Sweat was going to give him an extension. But that's a lot to give up for the guarantee of signing somebody when you could have signed somebody else or traded less for somebody else. Now they go into next year without a second-round draft pick. So they have 2 1s, which is great, but they don't have a 2. And they have, I think, 2 3s. This team is so far away from being really good. And that was just exposed this past Sunday night, in my opinion. The talent discrepancy between the Chargers and the Bears was vast. So this is good because it adds another really good player, but it takes away a very high draft pick when you need so much. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I think Ryan Poles is strange, especially as the other rumors are today that Jalen Johnson will be sent away, which would be frustrating if you're not going to keep your own guys who you do know in terms of their character and performance.
Yeah, and we know what Ryan Poles' process was. He wanted to, clear up a lot of space so he could sign multiple people in free agency. And you would assume that includes your top performers internally. So, I saw some things on Twitter. Well, if you're not going to let Jalen go, then you bring in Sweat and you kind of use that money for Montez Sweat.
Yeah.
To me, it's not an either or. You have plenty of money to pay both of these guys. Then you could use your first-round assets on offense in 2024 and kind of draft an offense and buy a defense. So to me, it's not either or. I'm a little confused because if we are to believe that the Chicago Bears are going to move on from Justin Fields, and it continues to trend in that direction, we don't know that yet.
I think they will, Bill.
Yeah, I think they will too. It's going to be really odd, Matt, to have a high-priced defensive end who's 28 years old the same year as your rookie quarterback.
Yeah, that doesn't feel like it makes a ton of sense for the team building, but that's why this one strikes me as so odd. Because if they were going to move Jalen, and we'll see if they do by the day's end, it kind of goes back to what I've believed has been the case and I've been kind of out here screaming it, and some people on the score haven't been buying it. I think Ryan Poles came into this job with designs on being bad for a couple of years and that being okay. I'd be surprised if he didn't have George McCaskey's blessing on that. And at the time, maybe Ted Phillips's blessing on that. And he's referenced the slow ramp up in Kansas City when he was there at the beginning. And you just see the way that they've added and built. I think he was ready for the double tank or the hot tank on tank action here of the first 2 years. And then year 3 next year is going to be thought of as year 1 of a competitive window. That's what it has seemed like to me. And with that in mind, you make the trade you did for DJ Moore, and you have the Justin Fields insurance of the 2 1s and a great quarterback draft class next year. And if Fields is great, awesome. They'll stay with him and they'll go. But Fields hasn't been great, and I think they're disappointed. And so now they're going to draft a quarterback next year. So, okay, well, if that's year 1 of your window, that's when your point about paying a 28-year-old defensive end at the top of the market seems pretty darn strange. But I guess you have to pay somebody. And I think they could absolutely pay Jalen and just have that secondary on lockdown in that way, because I like Tyreek Stevenson a lot. Seems like they've got a good eye for drafting corners. I thought Terrell Smith looked good when he had to play. Even undrafted free agent Jalen Jones has had some moments. So, like, they can judge secondary pretty well. I'll give them that. And they've spent money at the linebackers, but you know, having an expensive defense with Sweat and not with Jalen, I don't know. Maybe they don't want to pay Jalen because he doesn't make plays like Trevon Diggs, like he doesn't make enough splash and impact plays. But those guys seem to kind of wax and wane when it comes to production, whereas Jalen is a really solid cover corner with consistency.
Yeah, now, I don't know if you've thought about this angle yet, so I'm going to throw it at you. But that is kind of – there's a lot in flux with this Bears team right now, especially with the coaching staff. At least that's for we on the outside looking in feel that when you go 3-14 1 year and now you're 2-6, you have to figure someone like Matt Eberflus and his coaching staff is on the hot seat. Maybe they're not. When you make a move like this doesn't feel like a move you're making. It certainly doesn't feel like a move Ryan Poles would make if Ryan Poles is on the hot seat. It doesn't feel like he'd get approval to do something like this. If Matt Eberflus is on the hot seat, I mean, you're literally trying to beef up his defense. So for me, I'm sitting here trying to decide, is Matt Eberflus fired if they win 5, if they win 6? Is he safe if they win 7? Kind of like, what's the cutoff for this coaching staff? And then a move like this, and I get to wonder if it was 2 years of tanking, as you said, so to speak, is Matt Eberflus safe? I mean, I certainly don't like what I've seen from this coaching staff, but I don't know how to marry hot seats at Hallis Hall with this acquisition of Montez Sweat.
I think Matt Eberflus is far from safe. I think, assuming there's a new quarterback, I think there'll be a new head coach to go with him. And that Ryan Poles will have this opportunity to start fresh with a quarterback and a coach and himself all aligned. That is, I think, what was his vision kind of all along. It's a very cynical thought process, but I think he hired Matt Eberflus to withstand the double tank, to build a culture as best he could, to manage the difficulties of the everyday while his boss worried mostly about the future. And Matt Eberflus, an older defensive coach, all too happy to get a shot and get a chance to do it. And he's a culture guy, he's a hits principle guy. And here he is, he tries to build that and instill that. And now that that Poles is going to have his guy, I'm starting to get this feeling. I haven't said this on the air yet, but I'll say it today. Luke Getsy head coach next year with the quarterback of his and Ryan Poles choosing would be a level of continuity and sort of togetherness and a shared vision that I could see Poles enjoying and selling to Kevin Warren, because the wrench in here is Kevin Warren replacing Ted Phillips, and Kevin Warren, who's feverishly taking notes apparently during the Sunday night game and is watching all this stuff from on high. He could, of course, say, hey, Ryan, I know that's what you guys talked about with these 2 years of tanking and you having another chance, but it's too ugly and I'm going to have to make a deal. But if he does that, then the new GM is going to undo a whole bunch of stuff that Poles did. So Kevin Warren is smart enough to not do that and set the franchise back even further. I think Poles will be allowed to choose his own guy. And if it is Getsy, well, Getsy has his backup that he loves in Tyson Bagent, who's a QB2. And Getsy was also the head coach, or the offensive coordinator at Mississippi State when Montez Sweat was a senior there. So signing off a little bit on him as a person after they failed so badly last year with the personal scouting on Claypool. And we know Getsy had head coaching interviews before he took the OC job with the Bears. I wonder if that's where we're headed. But even with that little conspiracy theory aside, I think Matt Eberflus is in a lot of trouble and was hired by his friend with the possibility of getting fired after 2 years. And I do believe that's going to happen.
All right. Well, since we're talking about Eberflus and that Getsy thing, that you're giving me kind of shudders here, because I don't know if I like that plan very much. We'll get into Getsy here in a second, but let's talk about Eberflus, kind of, two parts here, the CEO aspect of him as a head coach and obviously being a defensive guy. And going to the Sunday game here, as let's start on the defensive side of the ball first. I mean, here's the first thing that bothers me with Matt Eberflus and this defense is if we want to talk hits principle, I mean, tackling and intensity and all the bottom line, the basics is kind of what you're supposed to be able to focus on and do really well. It's part of this whole culture that he's supposed to build, and it's consistently inconsistent. It's not there. We have bad tackling and bad penalties and negative plays, and it's just this culture that Matt Eberflus was supposed to build. You're certainly not seeing it day to day. Jaquan Brister, I assume today, was tweeting out about the Jalen Johnson rumors about trying to find a trade partner. He put a facepalm emoji out. He didn't seem very pleased with it. It just, Justin Fields says, I don't know about this coaching a few weeks ago. I'm feeling like I'm trying to do too much. Then he has to come back and basically apologize. It just feels messy at Hallis Hall week to week.
Yeah, it vacillates for me. Just last week before the Chargers game, I was looking around and feeling like, well, he hasn't lost these guys. Amidst all the craziness of the year, they were still kind of playing hard and busting their hump. And overall, the vibe about, we support Justin, but we support Bagent, but we also support Justin. That's all felt pretty clean and kind of natural from a teammate perspective. So I'm not sure. I think the culture has actually been in a decent place. What hasn't been there is the consistency on defense. So to your point, when he comes out after this game on Sunday night and says, our fundamentals are lacking and our angles are lacking and things like that, it's like, well, isn't that your gig? Isn't that exactly what you said you were going to be good at? And he was challenged directly on it at Hallis Hall this week, said like, Matt, it doesn't seem like the hits principle is working. And he stood up and defended himself on it. He said he didn't agree with that. And he tried to differentiate technique and certain skills of fundamentals to hustle and intensity. He believes the hustle and the intensity has been there. And I'd have to, for the most part, kind of begrudgingly agree. But the entire operation of things has occasionally been sloppy with the penalties. It certainly was on Sunday in a way. And also he's not a guy who commands a podium and commands a press corps very well. And it's natural to wonder whether he commands a locker room very well. That's certainly for sure.
And tell me if you agree or disagree with this, because this is what it's really been bothering me the last week or so. I've heard it for a while, and I hear it from Eberflus and Getsy, and when Getsy talks on Thursday. To me, like when Mike Tomlin's at the podium, I hear him say, we need to get better. We need to coach better. We need to execute better. He pulls the coaches always in. Bill Belichick, after they just lost on Sunday, I was listening to him. He said, the players need to play better. The coaches need to coach better. We need to improve, everywhere. And maybe he said it and I haven't heard it, but Matt Eberflus and Luke Getsy, I don't hear a lot of accountability out of their mouths when they're at the podium. I hear them talking about, well, the players need to tackle better. And Luke Getsy goes, oh, well, we drew up this play for this and it should have worked, but we didn't execute it the right way. Like, I never hear Getsy go, I didn't call a great game. I never hear Eberflus go, these guys weren't prepared. That's on me. I'm the head coach here. I don't hear that. I hear them pushing the issues on the players a lot, and I want to hear more accountability from my coaches. Is that something you agree with, or have you heard it differently?
Yeah, Getsy, we listen very carefully to a lot of Getsy. I've heard him every once in a while talk about the game plan. And yes, I listen to Justin, I listen to these guys and try to do what they do. I don't hear a lot of thumb pointing by him. So I understand what you're saying. With Eberflus, he's just so often chaos up there, man. He's a poor communicator. He is a poor communicator as a leader. And he gets trapped in his desire to say nothing, his desire to not give anything away. And you have to kind of delicately repeat yourself over and over. And he's just really bad at it. And sometimes he gets excited when he's like got an answer for something. And you can like see that and hear that in his tone. It's just, there are times where he becomes just white noise. And it happened a lot quicker than it happened with Matt Nagy. It does happen with Bears coaches often after a while that they become white noise. But this is the fastest it's ever happened for me with Eberflus.
All right. And while we're talking kind of the whole organization here and the coaching, I want to ask you about this. And I'm actually going to kind of compare it to baseball here and tell me where you are with this. I've gotten a lot of tweets lately about the Bears being cursed. They can't beat the Packers for 30 years. And even when Rodgers is gone, they still lose to Love and they can't win on Sunday Night Football. And I saw someone talking about the primetime curse and things like this. And here's what I say about curses. That to me, if you want to talk about the Red Sox being cursed, I mean, they'd win 90 games every year, but the Yankees would win 100. And when they would get in, they'd have Buckner or Bucky Dent or something go wrong. And I know the Cubs had their fair share of those with the collapse in 69 and the Leon Durham era in 84 and things like that. But it's not like the Cubs were at the dinner table, ready to eat year and year and couldn't get it done. This was a team, and I'm a White Sox guy, you're a Cubs guy. I'm not trying to rip the Cubs, but this is an organization that won 65 games every year because they had a major talent deficit on the field. That was the curse, was poor organization that wasn't putting together a winner. When I look at the Chicago Bears over this last really, 30 years now since kind of the end of the 80s era, other than the little blip with Lovey for 3-4 years, it's a talent deficit. I mean, they never have a quarterback in a league that is run by quarterbacks. It's a constant issue. There's a revolving door of coaches, revolving door of general managers. Questionable decisions are made, poor utilization of first-round picks. Like, this isn't the Bears on their way to being cursed. This is just what happens when you have an organization that is run poorly, or whether you want to talk about the Michael McCaskey years or the George McCaskey years. That's what this is. And that's what, that's why I bring up like the Cubs. You want to talk about the White Sox, even though no one labeled them with a curse. It's an organizational failure that creates this curse. It's not just a black cat running across the baseball field.
Oh, absolutely. Somebody said it distinctly and cleanly towards the beginning of the Theo Epstein regime with the Cubs for me. And they said that the curse was bad ownership for the Cubs. That was the curse. And I think that's been the curse for the Bears because it, Bill, you've seen it every few years. The changeover of a GM or a head coach or a quarterback has meant that things are never aligned. It meant that there's always chaos and someone is pulling for their guy and someone is trying to preserve their job. And it leads to a bad culture of leadership and collaboration that's actually supposed to be there if you're going to achieve organizational excellence. And the fault of it goes to the dysfunctional family business that is the McCaskeys, without a doubt. This is why so many of us praised the hiring of Kevin Warren, who may not be a brilliant football man, but at least is not a McCaskey or is not a lackey accountant who ingratiated himself into the dysfunctional family and then rose with their interests solely in mind, and him being elevated via the Peter principle to some place that he didn't actually belong. So look, the Lions brought in Chris Spielman to help their dysfunctional family, and he found their GM, who then found their coach, and they're in a really good place. Something you have to get outside your weird ass family. The Rickettses, once they bought the Cubs, brought in the very smartest guy they could in Theo Epstein and said, do what you think is best. and they backed the hell off. They really did. I watched it. I dissected it for a decade, for the entirety of the run. And it's like, you need to bring in somebody smarter than you and give them the keys. It's bad to say Stan Bowman's name these days or John McDonough's name these days because of the ugliness in the tail end of their tenure with the Blackhawks and what they allowed to happen there. But at the beginning, Rocky Wirtz went outside his father, Dollar Bill Wirtz's family, and said, I need somebody who's smart. And he brought in John McDonough, who said, yeah, let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. Let's talk to Scotty Bowman. What should we do? Because he was brilliant in Detroit. And if you steal, you steal from the best. This is the oldest thing in all of sports. I could keep going on this, Bill. The Baltimore Orioles decided they wanted a baseball genius to head their entire organization. And the smartest guy in baseball at the time was with the Cardinals. His name was George Kissel. Look him up, kids. He was brilliant. And George Kissel's protege was Earl Weaver. And the Orioles grabbed him and said, you come to Baltimore. And he installed their farm system and their training methodology. And, of course, was the manager for more than 20 years and led them to brilliance that lasted for decades. Go find somebody smart. What did the Dodgers do when they needed help? They went to Tampa and took Andrew Friedman. I mean, come on. So, and obviously the Bears at the very top needed to do this on a presidential level. And they finally done with Kevin Warren. I hope Kevin Warren makes whatever changes he decides to make, even if it includes Ryan Poles and everybody. And I hope he's here the next time if those things don't work, so he can learn from it and do better and advise them to do better. Because that's what's been missing is the consistency from one hire to the next within that 5 years. It's often been, well, we didn't do that. Let's just do this instead of learning and trying to get better and grow.
Yeah. And, and Kevin Warren, he is the wild card. He's critical to this whole thing moving forward. I assume if he came, leaving a Big Ten commissioner for this position, I assume he has, I don't want to say full control, but pretty darn close to it. I would think George says, hey, it's we're still the McCaskies. We own this thing, but you were going to run this thing. I would assume that's what this interaction is going to be moving forward. We don't know. We need to see it because, the Ernie Accorsi consultant plan, the Bill Polian consultant plan. And yeah, sure. These are, really good football minds. I get it. But, Bill Polian hadn't been in the league for 10 years. Sure. He built up the Jim Kelly Bills and he built up the Peyton Manning Colts. He's got a great resume, but he was an 80-year-old guy who hadn't been in the league for 10 years. And, my whole thing is people are like, well, they should have hired Mike McDaniel. Well, sure. That looks great now. But quirky Mike McDaniel sitting on a Zoom with Bill Polian and George McCaskey, I would just see them with their mouths agape, wondering what is this guy and how could he be a head coach? That's not forward thinking. Like, there's no accountability for Bill Polian if he gets it wrong. Jim Caldwell's the finalist because he's one of his buddies.
Right.
Like, that's where that goes. So with Kevin Warren in place, you have to hope that there is going to be actual accountability, that Kevin Warren, whether, he talks to Ryan Poles, the coaching staff, whatever it is, says, all right, if we're going to bring in a new coach, we're going to bring in a new quarterback, we're actually going to line everything up the right way, which is never done in Chicago, and, get the organization on the right page and moving forward together rather than everything always being so disjointed.
A boy can dream. A boy can dream, Bill. It's been an ugly go around, and it's too bad because how special it is in this town when the Bears are good. Like the vibes are immaculate everywhere. Conversations with toll collectors, people smiling at you in elevators and people bringing it up because nothing unites this town like the Bears. But it's been united in struggle for way, way, way too long.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, and I figured this was going to be kind of one of the lead conversations, when we first set up this interview, Tyson Bagent's performance on Sunday and kind of the quarterback situation in Chicago. We've made it to the end of the interview. We had so much to talk about before that, but I got frustrated. I'm going to be honest, more with the fan base than I did with Tyson Bagent. And now I almost feel like I'm ripping into this kid, and I'm not. I love this story. And if you can find a backup quarterback as a UDFA, that is a well done. I think that was more Luke Getsy than Ryan Poles. That is a great job. Well done. and you can't, you got to pay a good backup quarterback $6-7 million a year now, and you're getting a UDFA contract for a guy who can absolutely come in and keep the train on the tracks. He proved that against the Raiders. But this hype of, is he give him a better chance than Justin Fields and this and that, and they should stick with the kid and play him, and he has big promise. To me, this is a kid with physical limitations, and that's okay. He's going to be around for a couple of years as the backup, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is as the backup. We could see if he develops over time, especially when you think about the UDFA success story as a quarterback. Kurt Warner was 28, Tony Romo was 27, Brad Johnson was 29. When you get to the level of being a starting quarterback, it doesn't usually happen in a year or two. So I sit there and I'm trying to bring a lot of the fan base kind of back to, I feel, where it should be, about where Tyson Bagent is as a player, and go, let's enjoy the story, enjoy the ride of a backup quarterback, but not trying to make this kid something he isn't, where the expectations are unfair and he lets the city down.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And it's been a really interesting week and a half or so of conversation in this town. I think he's a great find and a great story as a QB2. As a backup. Isn't that an amazing thing that you've found? And you don't have to look for it anymore. And it's super cheap because you signed him as an undrafted kid for a 3-year deal. That's awesome. I do think if your roster was really, really good and you wanted to play complementary football and you had a badass defense with which to do so, that he could help you win more games than Justin Fields right now. I do think that's true if you were an elite team. If you were the Niners, could he step in and help you get through games? If you have the Jets defense, would you rather have him or a raw, unproven kid like Zach Wilson trying to show you that he can do things, or Justin Fields trying to show you that he can do things? It's like, it reminds me of, Kyle Orton and Rex Grossman with a really good Bears defense and a really good special teams, and Devin Hester is a game breaker. And to win a lot of games, they just need somebody to take care of the ball and be smart and do stuff. I think Bagent is that classic kid, and he's way more ready for that than I would have expected, and that deserves credit. So that idea is easy for football coaches to fall in love with. So they start talking about complementary football like crazy, and they start talking about everything and how he does things the right way. Of course, Justin Fields is a higher ceiling. This kid, I think, is a higher floor. His starting point of just functionality is higher than Justin's. And I think that's weird and a little sad. But, Justin struggles mightily at the layups, at the easy throws, at the gimmies, at the quick game, and takes way too long. And that's a scary thing to do if you're actually trying to win playoff games weekly. They should still be in development mode and should be playing Justin to give him a chance to grow. But eventually, teams run out of time with quarterbacks like that. They just do. Coaches run out of time, or they run out of patience, or whatever it is. It appears they've kind of already run out of patience with Justin, but, we'll see what happens the rest of the way. Justin should play as soon as he can and give them a chance to see more and give himself more of a chance to grow. But Bagent is a 2, and I think the coaches are thrilled with what they found and should be, and fans should be as well. And if the roster was a hell of a lot better, maybe I'd get behind advocating for Bagent over Fields, but it's just not even close to that at this point.
All right. Well, last one for you, speaking of improving the roster, and that is, I'm going to ask you a theoretical question on the 2024 draft, because I think pretty much all Bears fans, even if they are the most ardent Fields supporters, kind of understand that if the Bears are selecting 1 or 2 next year in the draft, that Caleb Williams or Drake May will be in a Bears uniform. I think most fans expect that. But with the Panthers getting a win and the Bears have a couple under their belt as well, if you're sitting 3rd, and I know we've got half a season of Justin Fields potentially to see where he is, but we've seen 6-7 games of him so far this year and still seeing that inconsistency. If you're sitting at number 3, forget coach changes and everything. Matt Spiegel gets to make the decision with the Chicago Bears with the 3rd pick. Are you going for someone like Marvin Harrison and maybe rolling it with Justin Fields again? Or is this you've got to reset the quarterback clock and whether that's J.J. McCarthy, Shedeur Sanders, whoever becomes that 3rd quarterback in this draft? Is that the direction you want to go? Or do you want to maybe beef up another position? Because there are some really good positional players in this draft.
Oh, God, this is where I get caught, Bill, between what I would do and what I think that they are going to do. I think they're done with Fields. I really do. And I think, we'll see what happens the rest of the way. But I think they're going to get another quarterback next year. Now, maybe they go get a veteran if there's somebody out there. Now that Kirk Cousins is hurt, that's off the table. So, it could be that they've conceived of that. But I think they're going to draft one. I'm with you that after those top 2, as of right now, nobody's screaming at me to be number 3. But what I suspect they're going to do is pick the quarterback that they love that they can get and go get him. And if it's not one of the top 2, then they'll find the next one that they get. Maybe they don't do it at 3. Maybe they do it at 7 if they have picks 3 and 7, something like that. Maybe they love Bo Nix. Maybe they do love J.J. McCarthy. I'm not sure. But somebody who can do what Poles believes an NFL quarterback has to do, which Fields at this point has shown that he can't. Be a pocket passer, read a field quick, go through 4 reads and get rid of it before 3.5 seconds. Somebody that can do that and also may have the tools to go outside and do a few things off schedule, but isn't an off schedule genius that is learning to be a pocket passer. So of the top 2, I'll answer the question you didn't ask. As of right now, I like Drake May more than I like Caleb Williams, because Drake May is one of those guys who is a pocket passer with just enough athletic ability to do more, whereas Caleb Williams is this freaking marvel and off-schedule genius who you still are going to have to train to be a pocket passer. And that I'm scared of that archetype. I count me as somebody scared of living that archetype again.
All right. Well, there he is. He's Matt Spiegel at Matt Spiegel 670 on Twitter/X. If you don't follow him there, I'm sure you already do. And of course, Parkins and Spiegel every afternoon. Well, every weekday afternoon on The Score. They got to give him a couple days off a week. Yeah, Matt, thanks so much for so much time. Enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed catching up, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, Bill, a pleasure. Thanks for having me.